Hi guys, it's Belle here and I'm coming on with my final video of this year's October daily. I had asked if you guys wanted to hear the story in full, and I also added a little epilogue, and you guys said you would love that, so that's what this video is. And the eagle-eyed amongst you will also see that I actually have created a new journal cover. It's not the same one I've been using throughout the month of October because I really did want a cover that kind of went with the overall feel of my story. So anyway, guys, when I printed it out, it turned out it was over 4,000 words and 9 pages long. So I suggest you grab yourself a nice hot drink, snuggle up under a blanket and get ready as I read you the tale. Oh, I just lost a piece of the Unwanted Inheritance. It was mid-October when I discovered a strange envelope sitting on my doormat. Breaking the wax seal, I pulled out the letter and a strange large metal key came with it. The letter read, "Belle, a few months ago, your distant relative, Dr. Rebecca Hallow, passed away. As her only living relative, you have been named as the sole beneficiary of her estate. As part of this estate, you have also inherited the deed to her home, situated in the Scottish Highlands. Within this envelope, you will find both the deed and the key to Hallow Manor. There is only one stipulation to this inheritance. You will only be entitled to keep it if you were able to remain within Hallow Manor for 31 days. Your relative has also left you this message. Be warned, Hallow Manor is a special place with a will of its own. Even if you want to stay, it may not let you. Yours sincerely, Utterson, Lanyon and Paul." I reread the letter several times, unable to fully believe it. An inheritance and a house. Who was this generous distant relative that I'd never heard of before? A week later, on Halloween, I packed up my car, making sure I had the strange old key, and journeyed all the way up to Hallow Manor. Just as I arrived, the sun was starting to set, so I pulled out my torch and made my way towards the house. I was astounded by the size of the house. It was large and had a wonderful old-world, faded grandeur to it. It seemed to be looming forward as if inspecting me. Surrounded by an extensive garden that merged into woodland, there was a stillness here that sent a chill down my spine. With so many windows, the house put me in mind of a spider with its multitude of eyes all trained on me, waiting for me to come close enough to get trapped up in its web. I shook myself, and tired after my long drive, I continued to walk up towards the house through the garden. It was overgrown, and I was taken by how silent everything was. Not a bird or an insect to be heard anywhere. I realized that to one side of the house there was what looked like a greenhouse, with plants climbing all over it, both inside and out. Opening the door, I pushed aside the foliage and walked in deeper. There in the greenhouse, in the middle of the greenhouse, stood a beautiful marble statue. It looked so lifelike, and as I took in all the details, I noticed an inscription on its base. It read, "Beware. It has come to dwell among us." A warning? What could it mean? Once again, those chills ran along my spine, so I decided it was time to head inside the house. As I took one last look over my shoulder at the statue, I could have sworn it had moved. Its eyes now seemed to stare straight at me. On entering the manor, I immediately was welcomed by its warm opulence. It was like something out of a Victorian novel. Rich wooden floors, deep reds and greens, but everything was definitely in need of repair, which I hadn't been expecting. On every surface, all over the grand hallway and into the living room, books and what seemed to be scientific papers lay open, as if someone had just literally been flicking through them. After having a quick look into the living room, I headed back out into the hallway. The damp, faded wallpaper was covered in photos and pictures, but one in particular stood out. It was a large framed photograph of a young woman. She gazed confidently into the camera, her arm resting on a book that looked similar to those that were lying all over the house. I wondered who this young woman was. Could she be the recently passed Dr. Rebecca Hallow, or maybe some other unknown relative? I could have been imagining it, but there seemed to be a definite similarity between the woman in this photo and the statue in the greenhouse. As I stood there continuing to look at the photo, I heard a strange scratching sound, almost like long nails on wood, and then there came a rustling. Standing very still, I tried to calm down my breathing so I could pinpoint the direction the sounds were coming from. Once my breathing had slowed, I made my way across towards the room. I opened the door and slowly peeped inside. It was a beautiful library. Once again, every surface seemed to be covered in books and papers, some of which seemed to have fallen to the floor. A breeze was coming in from an open window, and there, on the table, sat a huge black raven. Could that have been what was causing the strange noises? As I stood to look at the raven, I heard what sounded like footsteps above me. This house was so creepy. Gathering my courage, I ran up the stairs quickly to investigate. Stopping at the landing to try and listen some more, I noticed that the damp and decay was worse up here. Plants had literally ripped their way through the wallpaper, climbing over every surface and furniture. Moths fluttered everywhere, and I had that same strange feeling from the greenhouse, that feeling of being watched. Trying to ignore the creepy walls and moths and feeling of being watched, I stepped into what turned out to be a bedroom. Once again, books and plants were everywhere, and then I heard a hoot of an owl. And as I pulled aside the tattered lace curtain from the window to look for it, I noticed the night had properly fallen, and the purple clouds suggested an oncoming storm. There, sitting on the windowsill, sat a huge owl looking straight at me. What was it with all these winged creatures in this place? Beyond the owl loomed a large tree that looked black in the shadows, and its bark and branches seemed distorted. Once again, I got that feeling that something was watching me, creeping ever closer. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed shut, making me jump and my breath caught in my throat. As I turned slowly around, heart thumping, I realized that there, carved into the back of the door, was a message. I am lost. A joke, maybe? It seemed too high to have been made by a child, which only made the strange message seem even more ominous. Who was lost, and lost where? As I opened the door, I froze. There in the hall was a ghost-like figure that seemed to be coming out of the very wall itself. I could see the delicate pattern of the wallpaper through its form, its dead eyes staring straight at me, and a hand beginning to reach forward. Could it be an illusion created by the shadows and creepy atmosphere in here? Finally, ripping itself free from the wall, it moved quickly away down the corridor. Nope, definitely an illusion. Gathering all my courage, I chased the strange spectre until it led me down into a large kitchen of the house. Then just as quickly, it disappeared, leaving behind another icy chill. Where had it gone? My attention was finally taken by an elegant table in the centre of the kitchen, richly dressed in deep reds, set with roses and crystal glasses that twinkled in the candlelight. Candles that had not been lit by me. A huge plate of glistening meat and berries had been placed on the table. Stuck straight into one of the meats was a large carving knife, once again giving the impression that someone had recently been sitting here eating before I had rushed in. I noticed a piece of paper sticking out from under the plate. Pulling it free, I realized it was some sort of invitation. The paper itself was creased and burnt in places, making it a bit difficult to read, but it seemed to be a Halloween party, and it read, "You are cordially invited on this Halloween night to a very special party full of magic, full of frights. At the stroke of midnight, the fun will all begin. Make sure that you are ready for all the night will bring." This place just gets stranger and stranger. Who had sent it? Who was it for? With it being Halloween today, did it mean the party was tonight? Could it be here in the house? There was a note of warning in the words, and I couldn't shake the feeling I really should leave this place before midnight actually got here. Before I could think any more about the invite, I heard the doorbell go and what sounded like children. Slowly I crept towards the front door, still clutching the invite, and peered through the ornate window. There in the shadows of the porch stood 3 unnaturally tall figures, eerily still and silent. I was sure I had heard children laughing, but the height of those figures suggested something else. Very slowly, I opened the door. "Hello?" My voice shook a little, and it took me a moment to realize whoever had been there had now gone. How did they move so fast? The creep factor to this place just kept rising. As I looked around for any sign of the mystery door ringers, I noticed what seemed to be small sweets dropped all over the porch and down the steps. Maybe I just imagined the tall spooky figures. Maybe it was just kids trick-or-treating. But then why disappear and leave all these sweets? Tentatively, I picked up a piece. It smelt like violets and had a little skull stamped on the wrapper. Putting it in my pocket along with the invite, I took one last look around and go to head back inside when once again I heard something from the garden. It was a high-pitched lyrical sound, almost like that of a child, but with a strangeness to it. I followed the sound behind the house. "Hello?" I said again, but the sound had stopped and no reply came. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I spotted a huge building hidden in the shadows of the trees. Slowly I headed towards it, expecting at any moment a bunch of kids to jump out at me, but nothing happened, and the silence became oppressive. Reaching the building, I discover it's a beautiful mausoleum, built in the same beautiful style as the greenhouse earlier. I know I really shouldn't go in, but I can't resist. Pushing open the door with more confidence than I felt, again I said, "Hello?" Still no reply, though at this point I was grateful for that. I noticed that candles sat on every surface, and just as in the kitchen someone had lit them, their flickering flames casting strange shadows on the stone wall. Someone clearly loved pumpkins, as there were stacks of them everywhere. Some had really creepy faces carved into them, and just like the statue earlier, I could have sworn that they were watching me. Get a grip, Belle, I tell myself as I rub my hand over my tired eyes. The pumpkins can't actually be watching me. I'm letting the strangeness of this place and the fact that it's Halloween get to me. Glancing further into the mausoleum, my eyes fell on an ornately carved tomb. As I was already here, I figured I should just take a quick look. The stone slab on top had skulls carved into it, the craftsmanship amazing, and it looked as if at some point there had been a covering of gold leaf. Is that an inscription? I looked a little closer and tried to rub at the inscription to make it clearer to read, and as I did so, the stone moved slightly. Now I was really curious, so I slid the top across and peered down. Instead of the skeleton I might have expected to find, I actually see a set of marble steps leading into a passageway. Once more there is candlelight coming from below. Was someone else in this house besides me? The smart move would be good to go back into the house, but the idea there might be someone else here who was trying to scare me annoyed me. Plus, I'd always loved a good mystery. So slowly I began to make my way down. The steps are worn from years of use, and I realised I wasn't in a passageway at all, but in a huge cavernous room. The air down here was cool and dry, with a strange smell that I couldn't quite place. As I took in my surroundings, I noticed that every wall was covered in shelves, and there were hundreds of bottles full of strange substances. I tried to read some of the labels, but most were too old and damaged, and those that weren't seemed to be in Latin. Looking up at the roof, dried herbs were hanging everywhere. That must have been what the smell was. All of this must have belonged to Dr. Rebecca Hallow. Suddenly, I caught movement in my periphery. I tried to tell myself it was just a shadow created by the candlelight, but then something came rushing at me, snarling and laughing in that strange high-pitched voice I had heard early. I really should have remembered that curiosity killed the cat. I ran as fast as possible up the stairs, out of the mausoleum and back into the house. I only took a second to glimpse that thing that was coming after me. It seemed to be short and almost human, long tangled hair and wild eyes that seemed out of proportion to its body. A woman, maybe? There was something so wrong with the creature, and I couldn't shake the idea that it was completely unnatural, evil even. I felt certain it would have tried to kill me if I hadn't escaped. I didn't have much time to think because as I stood my back against the front door, praying I had escaped and trying to calm down, I heard the creaking of another door opening. I noticed an old wooden door under the stairs that I hadn't seen on first entering the house. It was opening slowly. Oh no, the creature must have found me. I stood frozen, wondering what I would do, when a hand slowly appeared through the gap and started to beckon me. What the? The hand was slender and pale, and it seemed to glow as if lit by moonlight. I nervously stepped closer and realized I felt none of the fear I had when I had encountered the creature in the mausoleum. The closer I got, the more I had the feeling that the hand was made of marble. As if hypnotized, I continued to move closer and closer, but all I could see was the strange hand, anything else hidden deep in the shadows beyond the door. Suddenly, it stopped beckoning me, and instead started to point to something behind me. Please no, please no, please no, I whispered to myself as I started to turn. Finally, I saw what the hand was pointing at. There, peering in through the window of the front door, was a face. It looked just like the face of the creature. Its wild red and green eyes were glaring back at me, filled with such malevolence. It took me a second to check that the front door was locked. before I turned and ran towards the door under the stairs where the marble hand had been. I had no idea what awaited me behind that door, but I was willing to risk it to be as far away from that creature as possible. I rushed through the door and down another set of stairs and found myself in yet another unexpected room. This one was definitely set up as a laboratory of some kind. Tables covered in strange equipment, the walls full of shelves with more of those bottles that I had seen in the mausoleum, and anatomy posters. Books and papers lay everywhere, just like upstairs. Slowly, I started to walk around the room, picking up bits and pieces, noticing that there was no dust anywhere. I picked up a large book with the word diary written on the front, and just as I started to flick through it, I heard a strange creaking coming from a corner of the room. There seemed to be the shape of a rocking chair covered in a dust sheet over in the corner where the creaking came from. It may just have been my imagination, but the sheet seemed to be moving. Gathering all my remaining courage, I began to lift the sheet, when suddenly something flew out at me. I screamed and went to run before realizing it was that bloody raven again. Now, it just sat still, perched on another one of those strange statues that I kept seeing everywhere. Just when I thought my nerves couldn't take much more, from nowhere a gramophone started to play. I recognised the music piece as Dance Macabre. This place was crazy. Suddenly the doors of a closet burst open and a group of skeletons leapt out and started to dance around me. Faster and faster they danced, bones clacking and creaking. The music continued to swell into a crescendo, and they spun around faster and faster and faster until just as suddenly the music stopped. The silence deafening, and all the skeletons dropped, each one falling into a pile of bones that began to move. The bones crept along the floor, forming letters. I watched transfixed and terrified as they spelt out the word leave. All the events of the day finally caught up with me, and I fainted. When I came to, I looked around and discovered there was no message written in bones, no skeleton in the closets, and no creepy rocking chair, just a dust sheet on the floor of the laboratory. It dawned on me that I hadn't eaten anything all day, so putting everything I had seen down to both exhaustion, dehydration, I picked up the diary that had fallen when I had fainted and wearily made my way back upstairs to the bedroom, first checking the window of the front door for any face. Once I had finally crawled into bed, exhausted, I heard fluttering and looked around the room and noticed more of those giant moths I'd been seeing everywhere. There were just so many that it really creeped me out. So I pulled the covers over my head and drifted into a restless sleep. My dream was a vivid one, a dream filled with all that I had seen. Pumpkins and bones, ravens and books, and there in amongst it all, the lady from the laboratory in the hall, the lady from the photo in the hall. She was working in a laboratory, experiment after experiment failing, and then there was the creature laughing maniacally. Success at last! Then the creature was running and hiding. Something was after it. Something wanted to destroy it. Unable to breathe, I woke with a start, and just as the dream began to slip from me, I caught the final message. Beware hubris. Once my breathing had slowed again, I fell back into a deep sleep, and this time it was dreamless, and I woke feeling surprisingly refreshed. Stepping into the bathroom to get ready, I briefly looked into the old cracked mirror before washing my face. When I next looked in the mirror, it had turned to red, as if flames burnt from within it. And then that creature from the mausoleum appeared, trying to claw its way through the mirror towards me. The image shifts until it's my own distorted features staring back at me. And then as I watch, they shift back into the creatures. And I decide I have had enough. They could keep my inheritance. I refuse to spend one more second in this cursed house. I grabbed my bag and rushed towards the front door, the moths still fluttering all around me. It was a miracle that I didn't fall in my haste to leave. As I pulled open the front door, I flung the key behind me, saying, "Keep your house, I don't want it." And I heard the key clatter to the floor as I rushed down the path towards my car. Diving into my car and slamming the keys into the ignition, I took one last look into my rearview mirror and I saw something that made my heart stop. The windows of the house were shattering as plants were forcing their way out and covering the walls. The very garden itself was growing, shifting, moving, becoming an impenetrable forest. And then there, in the centre of it all, I glimpsed the creature and all around her the marble statues. Now, there was definitely no denying that they were moving. They grabbed at the creature and seemed to be pulling her down. I heard one last anguished cry from the creature, and then everything was hidden behind the garden and the trees as I drove away. Epilogue. It's been a week since I left Hallow Manor, and I'm still nervous and find myself repeatedly checking all my windows and doors are locked. I contacted the lawyers immediately to let them know I had left the house and had no intention of going back. They replied a few days later, letting me know that someone had gone to the house and after cutting their way through the garden, had found the house fully dilapidated and full of plants and trees. They had also found a strange statue in the garden. It was covered in ivy and seemed to be of a woman, mouth open and clawed hands reaching skyward. When I had returned home, I had found the diary from the laboratory in my bag, even though I couldn't remember packing it. I began to read it, and it soon became clear that my relative, Dr. Rebecca Hallow, had been conducting experiments with herself as the test subject. She seemed obsessed with the idea of finding a way to gain control of the less desirable sides of human nature. Her desire was to separate the essence of what was good from bad within a person. Her experiments became increasingly extreme as she took the essences of plants and mixed them to create elixirs that she hoped would prove successful. It seems she discovered something that appeared to work, and from then on, the diary was written in two different hands, one neat and ordered, the other wild scrawls barely readable. Near the end of the diary, she had kept writing about some strange things going on around her, and then the final entry, scrawled in that other hand, simply read, "The statues are alive." After that, nothing more, just a few empty pages. Another week passed, and I was beginning to feel more like myself again. I had decided Rebecca had been suffering with some sort of mental illness, and that what I had experienced had been brought on by the atmosphere of the house, the spookiness of Halloween, and my own overactive imagination from reading far too many books. As I pulled open my bedroom curtains to look out on a new grey November day, my breath caught in my throat. As there, in my garden, was a marble statue, and it was looking right up into my window, straight at me. The end. Da-da-da! Okay, guys, I really hope you enjoyed that. 9 pages and over 4,000 words later. I'm not a story writer, so, you know, excuse me if there were a few mistakes, but I absolutely loved creating this story, and obviously basing it on the idea of Jekyll and Hyde. I love this charm I've put together with like the little potion bottles, the pen, obviously, because it's a story, skulls, there's the key, leaves for the plants. We've got a butterfly to represent all the butterflies and moths, a little book made by my wonderful friend Sarah, who I've just stuck a little thing on, and just some Tim Holtz charms. I put the altered one on there because obviously she is altered, and the beware caution one. And yeah, I just used some eco dyed fabric, similar to another cover for another journal. I knew this fabric was going to be perfect. Put one of those scary Halloween, hope that's picking up, pictures on there. Distressed it, put some gilding, added some of those leaves, got to have the leaves, and this little fake cameo that made me think of the marble statues. And if you notice, the digital here is the same, from the same kit, so it's the same image at the start of the house as I've used on the very final page, but this time with all the windows broken. I had decorated this little envelope I'd received with a purchase that I recently made. I decorated it all up because I was intending to use it to keep my story in. It's not going to fit. So instead I'm just keeping my October daily stuff in there. There is a pocket behind here, but I'm thinking I may have to attach another pocket on here. And I do want to print this out again. And back, you know, print it double-sided and print it on tea stain paper to put into my journal. So anyway, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this little extra, including the little spooky epilogue, and that you've enjoyed following my October daily process this year. I have loved it. So big thank you to Release the Crafting and Pink Oddbird for creating such a wonderful prompts for this year's October daily. And I've really enjoyed sharing my pages with you guys. So let me know what you think down below, guys. Let me know if you enjoyed that read through. And yeah, thank you so much for watching me. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you've enjoyed what you've seen and haven't subscribed yet and would like to, hit that subscribe button. But until next year, guys, that's it for the October Daily. So bye-bye to October Daily 2022, guys. But it's almost time for our Christmas, our December Daily Journal. Not quite the same, but you know. So thank you so much for watching. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you are safe, and I hope you're having lots of crafty fun. Until next time, guys. Bye for now.